What blood pressure really is and why it's quietly damaging you. Right now, your blood vessels are under constant physical strain, not emotional stress, not mental pressure. Real mechanical force pushing outward against the walls of every artery in your body. That force is acting inside your brain, your kidneys, and the vessels supplying your heart, whether you notice it or not. Blood pressure isn't just a number written on a chart at your doctor's office. It's a continuous load that shapes how your arteries age, how much work your heart has to do, and how long your organs remain functional as you move into later decades of life. When this pressure stays elevated for years, it quietly remodels the inside of your vessels, stiffens the arterial walls, and forces your heart to pump against resistance. It was never designed to tolerate long-term. Hypertension is one of the most undertreated chronic conditions in the modern world because it rarely causes symptoms early on. Most people feel completely normal until the day they suffer a stroke, a heart attack, kidney failure, or begin developing vascular cognitive decline. By the time those events occur, the damage has been building silently for years. For decades, the public message has been simple. Salt is the enemy. Reduce sodium and your blood pressure will come down. While that advice helps some people, it hasn't solved the global hypertension crisis. Many individuals carefully cut salt, yet see little change in their readings. That's because blood pressure isn't driven by one single input. It's regulated by multiple biological systems working together. And when one of those systems becomes dysfunctional, removing salt alone doesn't correct the underlying problem. I'm Dr. Alex. I work in emergency medicine, and over nearly a decade in the emergency department, I've seen what uncontrolled blood pressure eventually leads to. Not abstract risks, but real people arriving with catastrophic complications that could have been prevented years earlier. My aim is to help you understand the mechanisms behind blood pressure, so you can intervene early, before medication becomes the only line of defense. Before we talk about sugar, salt, or diet, you need to understand what actually creates blood pressure in your body. Blood pressure is determined by three physiological factors. The first is cardiac output, how much blood your heart pumps with each beat. The second is total blood volume, how much fluid is circulating inside your vessels. The third is vascular resistance, how relaxed or constricted your arteries are at any given moment. If any one of these rises, blood pressure increases. If two rise together, pressure climbs further. If all three shift in the wrong direction, hypertension becomes severe. Each of these components is controlled by a different biological system. Your heart rate and stroke volume respond to signals from your nervous system and stress hormones. Your blood volume is regulated primarily by your kidneys, which decide how much sodium and water to retain. And your vascular resistance is governed by the health of the endothelium, the delicate inner lining of your arteries that produces nitric oxide to keep vessels flexible and open. When nitric oxide production declines, arteries lose their ability to relax. Resistance increases even if blood volume and heart rate remain unchanged. This is why blood pressure isn't a single problem with a single solution. It's the end result of kidney signaling, vascular health, and nervous system tone interacting over time. And that's why generic advice works for some people and fails completely for others. Salt vs. sugar. Two different pathways to high blood pressure. For more than 50 years, salt has been framed as the main dietary villain behind hypertension. And that idea didn't come out of nowhere. Sodium directly affects fluid balance in your body. When you consume a salty meal, sodium enters your bloodstream and pulls water along with it to maintain proper concentration. This temporarily expands your circulating blood volume. More volume inside a closed system means more pressure against vessel walls. It's basic physics. Your kidneys are designed to correct this. They constantly monitor pressure and sodium levels, and when volume rises, they increase sodium and water excretion to bring pressure back toward baseline. In a healthy metabolic state, this feedback loop works remarkably well. You can eat more salt one day, and your kidneys will simply eliminate the excess without any lasting change in blood pressure. The problem is that not everyone's kidneys respond the same way. Salt sensitivity varies widely between individuals. People with impaired kidney function, reduced vascular flexibility, genetic predisposition, or long-standing metabolic disease often experience larger and more sustained pressure increases after sodium intake. For them, volume regulation is already compromised. But here's what decades of research have made clear. Salt primarily raises blood pressure by expanding blood volume. It doesn't fundamentally damage the vascular system on its own. It's a mechanical driver, not the root cause of chronic dysregulation. That's where sugar enters the picture. Refined carbohydrates and sugars raise blood glucose, which triggers insulin release. Insulin's job isn't limited to glucose control. It also signals your kidneys to retain sodium. This means that even on a low-sodium diet, persistently high insulin levels can keep your kidneys locked into sodium retention mode. Water follows sodium, so blood volume remains elevated regardless of how much salt you consciously avoid. At the same time, chronically elevated insulin stimulates the sympathetic nervous system. This raises heart rate and increases vascular tone, pushing both cardiac output and resistance upward. On top of that, fructose metabolism generates uric acid, which impairs endothelial nitric oxide production. When nitric oxide availability falls, arteries lose their ability to relax. Resistance increases even further. So sugar doesn't raise blood pressure through water alone. It acts hormonally, neurologically, and metabolically. It alters kidney signaling, stiffens arteries, and sustains high pressure over time. This is why many people see minimal improvement from sodium restriction alone. They're reducing volume intake, but the hormonal signal telling the kidneys to hold sodium never turns off. The real trap of the modern diet is that salt and sugar rarely appear in isolation. Ultra-processed foods combine both in engineered ratios designed to drive consumption. You get the immediate volume expansion from sodium and the prolonged hormonal sodium retention from insulin. Meanwhile, these foods are often low in potassium and fiber, two nutrients that normally help counteract sodium's effects and support vascular relaxation. This combination is uniquely harmful. Sodium raises pressure acutely. Sugar prevents your body from correcting that rise. Over time, this locks the cardiovascular system into a chronically elevated pressure state. This is why hypertension tracks more closely with ultra-processed food consumption than with salt intake alone. How blood pressure really comes down, and why meds alone don't fix the system. Once you understand what pushes blood pressure up, it becomes much clearer what actually brings it down in a lasting way. Long-term pressure control isn't about one nutrient, one supplement, or one isolated habit. It's about restoring the biological environment your cardiovascular system is meant to operate in. Blood pressure reliably falls when three things shift in the right direction. The first is insulin. When insulin levels drop and remain lower for extended periods, your kidneys regain the ability to release sodium normally. They stop behaving as if the body is in permanent storage mode. This alone can reduce circulating blood volume and lower pressure without touching salt intake directly. The second is endothelial function. Healthy blood vessels produce nitric oxide, a molecule that allows arteries to relax and remain flexible. When nitric oxide production improves, vascular resistance falls. Blood can flow with less force, and pressure drops naturally. This is why people with better metabolic health often have more elastic arteries and lower baseline blood pressure. The third is renal sodium handling. When the hormonal environment normalizes, the kidneys stop being locked into retention mode and begin responding appropriately to actual sodium intake again. Pressure regulation becomes dynamic rather than fixed at a high level. Every lifestyle intervention that genuinely lowers blood pressure long-term works through one or more of these three mechanisms. Physical activity is one of the most powerful tools we have. Exercise increases shear stress along the vessel walls, which stimulates nitric oxide production by the endothelium. Importantly, this effect persists for hours after you stop moving. Regular movement effectively turns your blood vessels into a more active source of natural vasodilators. The benefit isn't just calorie burn or weight loss. It's a direct biochemical effect on arterial function. Dietary fiber works primarily through insulin control. Fiber slows glucose absorption, flattening post-meal blood sugar spikes. This reduces how much insulin your pancreas needs to release throughout the day. Lower insulin means your kidneys are no longer constantly being signaled to retain sodium. Over time, this allows normal pressure regulation to re-emerge. Sleep affects blood pressure through the nervous system. Poor sleep increases sympathetic tone, raising heart rate and tightening blood vessels. Restorative sleep shifts the balance toward parasympathetic dominance, lowering cardiac output and vascular resistance simultaneously. In physiological terms, it's the difference between staying on the accelerator and finally applying the brakes. In emergency medicine, we see blood pressure in its most dangerous forms. Hypertensive crises, strokes caused by years of uncontrolled pressure, heart failure driven by chronic afterload. Medications absolutely save lives in these situations. ACE inhibitors reduce hormonal vasoconstriction. Diuretics force sodium excretion. Calcium channel blockers mechanically relax arterial smooth muscle. These drugs lower numbers, and lowering numbers prevents immediate catastrophe. But medication alone doesn't correct the metabolic drivers that pushed blood pressure up in the first place. The patients who need fewer drugs over time are almost always the ones improving the biological environment beneath the numbers. As visceral fat decreases, insulin sensitivity improves. As whole foods replace processed foods, endothelial function recovers. As movement and sleep normalize, vascular tone shifts. The medications work better because the system they're acting on is becoming healthier. There's also a clear difference in who responds to salt restriction. Younger, metabolically healthy individuals often see meaningful drops in pressure when sodium is reduced because their kidneys and vessels can still adapt. Older patients with insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome frequently see little benefit from salt reduction alone because their pressure is hormonally driven. For them, sodium isn't the primary lever. This doesn't mean salt is irrelevant. It means it's not the root problem for most modern cases of hypertension. The original question was salt versus sugar. But the real answer is that hypertension isn't driven by one ingredient. It's driven by a food environment that disrupts blood pressure regulation at multiple points. Salt raises pressure through volume. Sugar sustains pressure through hormonal and endothelial dysfunction. Ultra-processed foods deliver both together while stripping away potassium and fiber that would normally help your body restore balance. Hypertension, in most cases, is not a simple salt problem. It's a systems problem created by industrial food design, metabolic dysfunction, and chronically altered kidney and vascular signaling. When those systems are restored, blood pressure often comes down with far less pharmacological force. If you found this useful, consider subscribing. The goal of this channel is to help you understand disease before it becomes irreversible. Blood pressure isn't just a number. It's a signal about how well your internal systems are functioning. And once you understand the system, you stop fighting the wrong battle.